Good morning, friends. We welcome to Legal Breeze on an important topic about the importance of directive principles of state policy. We all know the Constitution of India is run by two wheels or two eyes. What is that? One is known as fundamental rights gifted to the humanity. Another is directive principles of state policy, again gifted to attain more humanity. So one cannot be at the cost of another. At the same time, it has to be balanced between the competing claims. It has to be given harmonious interpretation. It is not one is primacy over another, or one is superior over another, or one is inferior to another. But to reach to this understanding, it has taken a long time to the Supreme Court and other constitutional entities created by the Constitution of India, particularly to the judiciary. But thanks to the executive and the parliament, they have taken a very proactive role right from the independence. They have taken a lot of attempts to implement the directive principles at the cost of striking down by the judiciary very frequently. In fact, one should remember, we had a person, I think A.N. Rao, the advisor to the Constituent Assembly, have undertaken a trip to the US to discuss the language to be used in Article 21. He wanted to know whether the due process of law is better or procedure established by law is better. The procedure established by law has been used in the Japanese Constitution. Again, the Japanese Constitution has been drafted by the US drafters, with the help of the US drafters. On the other hand, the due process clause has been used in the very US Constitution itself. So India has to take a view between the two. So this Constituent Assembly advisor has gone to the US and consulted many constitutional luminaries, including Justice Frankfurter. Justice Frankfurter has advised him to use the procedure established by law because in the US there is a concept called substantive due process and procedural due process. Procedural due process is okay, but substantive due process will obstruct the development path taken by the Parliament and the Congress and the executive in the US. After the Great Depression in the years 1930s, the Supreme Court of US has played an obstructive role in creating more labor reforms, social security reforms, and other facilities given to the US citizens. So he expressed his apprehension such a role may be played by the Supreme Court of India also. His prediction has become very true in the case of directive principles of state policy is concerned. Again, people should understand the relationship between directive principles and the fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are enshrined under Part 3, directive principles are enshrined under Part 4. One is called negative obligations. Whatever obligations conferred on the state under the Part 3 is generally largely negative in nature. It's not exclusively negative in nature. There are certain rights like right to life and personal liberty, though the non-interference is warranted in this article also on the part of the state. But to promote the right to life, state has to perform positive role in a bigger way. To prevent the right against exploitation, mere law is not sufficient. Government has to gear up its enforcemental machineries to see that the exploitation is getting prevented to the women and children at the hands of the exploiters, including labor exploitation, sexual exploitation, many things. So it is not possible to say that exactly this is negative obligations and whatever given in the directive principles is exactly positive obligation. But largely positive obligations have been conferred upon the state to carry out the provisions of directive principles. Negative obligations have been conferred upon the state to carry out the provisions of fundamental rights. And people classify this civil and political rights have been guaranteed under fundamental rights. Economic and social rights have been guaranteed under the directive principles of state policy. This is not exactly true, but to a greater extent it is true. But each and everything is overlapping, interrelated, interconnected. One cannot act without the support of another. To put it differently, you cannot enjoy in the fundamental rights independently without enforcing the directive principles of state policy. That is the truth. You should know, the very first amendment itself has been done by the Parliament in order to nullify the judgment rendered by the Honorable Supreme Court in Chambagaraman Durai Rajan case. Chambagaraman Durai Rajan was the state of Madras. So as to enforce the directive principles of state policy. Equals can be treated equally, but unequals cannot be treated equally. To see that the unequals are getting equality, you need to do lot of positive measures. You need to provide an enabling mechanism for those people who are deprived their rights for centuries together. So this has happened not only in the reservation matter, but in the land related affairs also. The Parliament has amended many a times relating to the acquisition of lands or right to property guaranteed under Part 3 many a times. And whenever the Parliament has amended even the Constitution, the Supreme Court has played an obstructive role in that. So for a longer time, the Parliament, the Government of India couldn't implement the agrarian reforms, land reforms, Zamindari reforms, Rayatwari reforms, Urban Land Ceiling Act, all these things they couldn't do. Either because of the pendency of the case or many a time Supreme Court rules against it in the name of fundamental rights. And they have given complete primacy only to the fundamental rights. To a greater extent, they have ignored the directive principles of state policy. Slowly, after Sajjan Singh case, some dissenting views have come. After Keshwanand Bharati case, the balance has been tilted. Even by the Supreme Court started looking at the directive principles in a different way. The classic case is M.R. Balaji versus State of Mysore. And much earlier to that, there is one High Court ruling, Vishwanath versus Government of Mysore. In this particular case, the High Court of Mysore has rightly opined against the so-called family occupation or family educational system, or in Tamil it is called Kulakalvi system. The then Rajaji made a ruling that barber son has to remain as a barber, he has to learn the barber profession. The cobbler son has to learn the occupation of cobbling, like that. And the washerman son has to learn the washing. They can go to the schooling only part time, whereas non-OBCs, non-Dalits can go to this school full time. So this has been, the High Court of Mysore has expressed its anguish in the case called Vishwanath versus Government of Mysore. But the then Supreme Court is not in the mood to listen to those things. Fortunately, the Parliament has raised to the occasion by bringing lot of constitutional amendment. The 42nd Amendment and 44th Amendment has given much more superiority to the directive principles by inserting the relevant provisions in very Part 3 itself, that is 31C. 31A and B largely inserted to protect the land reforms legislations from being attacked by the judiciary on the name of fundamental rights. But 31C has given more importance, particularly for Article 39 clause B and C, and 44th Amendment has extended the same for the entire directive principles of state policy. Today, in Indira Saghani versus Union of India in 1993 Mandal Commission case, the Supreme Court has rightly balanced. It has rightly recognized the value of the directive principles and fundamental rights. They said it should go hand in hand, complement to one another. And they said reservation can be done not merely through enacting law, it can be done even through a mere executive order. A government order is sufficient to promote reservations so as to fulfill the directive principles of state policy. Previously, there is a need. People understood that there shall be a recital in the objective clause, in the title of the act itself, that this act has been brought into force so as to enforce the principles of directive principles of state policy and embodied under Part 4. There is no such recital is necessary as per the Supreme Court views, as per the latest decisions. This has been affirmed even IR Kalu versus State of Tamil Nadu very recently. So this is the trend. The directive principles of state policy fortunately has been recognized by the Supreme Court in the cases relating to minimum wages right from the Vijay Cotton Mills case. Fortunately, they have played a very crucial role. The directive principles have been used as a tool to promote labor reforms in this country. And not only wages related and other facilities like creation of accessibility to education, transportation, telecommunication, all these ways, Supreme Court used the directive principles of state policy, particularly Article 39 Clause B and 39 Clause C has been used. And if you see that centrality of welfare state resides in these particular two classes, because you need to do a role negative, that is, you should prevent the concentration of economic powers in few hands. You should prevent the private monopoly, to be precise, and then you should do the distributive justice. That's very important. The wealth created by the state shall be distributed equitably, not on equality basis, but on an equitable basis. You cannot give 100 rupees to the rich man and the poor man, because by getting 100 rupees is nothing for a rich man, but getting 100 rupees for a poor man is big. So you cannot give the same resources. At least you can give 1000 rupees to the poor man, and 100 rupees to the rich man. There is no problem at all. And that is how the concept of legal aid has come into picture. So 42nd Amendment and 44th Amendment has created a crucial role in the enforcement of directive principles of state policy. During the globalization or after the globalization, what is the scenario? The first stage, the Supreme Court has given primacy only to the fundamental rights. Next stage, yes, they said directive principles can go hand in hand. Then slightly it has tilted the balance. They have given primacy to the directive principles over fundamental rights in certain cases. Later on, the stage has come. Both directive principles as well as the fundamental rights have been prescribed or declared as part and parcel of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. Therefore, both the parts have got equal protection from the judiciary, so that it has become inviolable even through constitutional amendment. It cannot be taken away. But after the globalization, I am afraid, the mandate of the directive principles have been largely ignored. Say, whatever nationalization you have done, nationalization of banks, nationalization of transport corporations, and nationalization of power grid corporations, all these things have been done feasible, possible only because of the enforcement of directive principles of state policy. Supreme Court has also upheld those laws, constitutional validities of those laws pertaining to nationalization of the aforestated affairs. But today we are privatizing everything completely, including Air India, telecom. The recent Spectrum case, 2G, 3G, whatever you may call it, that also been really heavily relied upon or heavily supported only by the virtue of principles contained under Article 39 Clause B. But Many a times this mandate has been ignored. For a paltry sum, companies like Balco has been privatized. And we do not know what will happen to the other Navaratna companies. Not only loss making companies, but the profit making companies are also sold to the private people today. These are all taxpayers' money. Who can be made accountable for the losses? We do not have such an accountability. There is no such mechanisms at all. So I believe that there are certain visionaries even today in the Supreme Court who promote fundamental rights, particularly the gender justice. Right, the juvenile justice has also gained momentum to a greater extent. Not to the victims, of course, to the accused to a greater extent. But I believe we need to have a greater judges who understand the directive principles of state policy. Many a time the Supreme Court has read into many directive principles into the fundamental rights, particularly the environmental jurisprudence. The entire gamut of environmental jurisprudence have been developed by way of reading the directive principles of state policy into under Article 21. And the directive principles have also become a fundamental right today. The glaring example is right to education. But this is happening only in limited areas. So in the name of globalization, we are not against any reforms, whether it is labor reforms, agricultural reforms, land reforms, or civil service reforms, administrative reforms, judicial reforms. Reforms should necessarily come, but not at the cost of destroying the very basic values, namely the directive principles of state policy. Jai Hind, God bless you.